afternoon, everybody. We are definitely short on people, so I'll give it a couple minutes for people to sign on. I know we do have some folks out because there is rescheduling of some sporting events because apparently tomorrow we're getting weather. So. Okie dokie. So, I am just going to open your syllabus real quick so that we can all be on the same page about what everything is coming up. I'm going to share screen for that. Okay. So, things coming up here. Your interview paper, technically due today. I don't know why I thought today was the 29th when it's the 30th. I apparently just didn't read the calendar right. But if you haven't done your interview yet, what have you, you can have more time. Someone asked me how many points off are there. It's COVID time. You don't get any points off for turning stuff in late. I do ask, however, that you be mindful of how much is coming up at the end of the semester and you don't overwhelm yourself. And I'd ideally like everything turned in by the 27th, our last day of class, just so I can get it all graded. So keep that in mind because that's really not that long. It's only about a month away, which is a little mind-boggling, right? It's good because we all need a break, right? It's not as great because we're got a lot to do. So your service learning paper is due on the 20th, and then your final, which is the same format as your midterm, is due the 27th, and then you'll do your presentations, which are based on your paper during our exam time. And like I said before, those are really chill, about 5 minutes-ish. If you need to take a little longer, fine. If you need to take a little shorter, also fine. So, any questions on anything that's coming up? Feel free to stick them in the chat or to unmute and ask them out loud. Alrighty then. Well, so we have like a slide and a half, I think, to finish from last time. And then we will actually go into our new chapter. And it's really interesting. I don't know how this happened. I don't know if I was out of it or what the last time I taught this class, but I used the same edition of the book last time I taught this class, and yet like I didn't update the chapter numbers for myself. So when I was looking at stuff for today, I was like, oh, it must be the between arrest and trial chapter. No, it's the jury selection chapter today, which is fine because that's what I've been telling you all anyway. But for some reason, I just didn't have it correct in my mind. So good times, good times. So today we're going to talk about jury selection. That might bleed a little bit into Thursday, and then we'll start talking about jury deliberations. During that, we're going to watch the movie 12 Angry Men. and you'll have an assignment based on that. And then you also have an assignment today. So we are going to go ahead and get rolling in just a sec here. I should know better. I have learned during this that I can't talk and click at the same time, so I should have just paused my talking while I open the PowerPoint. Alrighty. So again, not very much left. We were talking about risk assessment. And so I think that that's important to give a decent amount of time to. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Okay. Alrighty. So psychologists may be asked to do these types of assessments in a variety of situations. Could be tied to the commitment procedures we talked about the other day. It could also be tied to any of the evaluations we've talked about before. So for example, not guilty by reason of insanity, incompetence to stand trial, the custody cases, etc. So the terms dangerous and dangerousness merge three distinct concepts. First one is risk factors, and those are variables associated with the probability that violence or aggression will occur. The second is harm, which is the nature and severity of the predicted or actual aggression. So if this person does act out their aggression, how much harm would come as a result? The third is the risk level, which is just the probability that harm will occur. And again, harm can be to yourself or to someone else. Clinicians who perform risk assessments try to predict which people are and are not likely to behave violently in certain circumstances. They also have to give an estimate of the risk for violence and offer suggestions on how to reduce that risk. Now, as you can imagine, many different factors make risk assessment difficult. So some reasons, the base rate of violence in some group is so low, clinicians are being asked to predict a phenomenon that rarely occurs. It's a lot easier to predict a phenomenon that occurs more often, because then you can have good research about it, good predictability. But if you're looking at someone like, are they going to do something that only 1 in a million people would do, right? That's a lot harder to predict. And predictions have often been for long-term risks. You're being asked to make a long-term prediction of risk of violence. And that's a lot harder to predict than violence risk over a shorter time frame. In order to be accurate, clinicians should have information about a range of historical, personal, and environmental violence-related variables, have limitations on predictions for specific kinds of violent behavior. So they should be really honest in their report about the limitations of these predictions. In psychology, it's actually really honorable to explain what you do and do not know, right? Here is the evidence to back this up, but, past predictions have only been 64% accurate, something like that. And then concentrate on appraising risks based on specific settings rather than in general. So is this person going to, have problems if we let them out on bond, or harm themselves if we don't inpatient hospitalize them? Something along those lines. Like I said, very little left, but I didn't want to rush it too much the other day. All right, so now we'll start talking about jury selection. And your book now calls this chapter Preparation for Trial, and roles some of what used to be in a separate chapter called Between Arrest and Trial into it. That I'll cover after we cover everything about juries. So juries will be jury selection and then jury deliberations. And then we'll have a chapter about essentially between arrest and trial. And some of the stuff that's now housed in this chapter in your book will be covered then. So jury selection, you know, one of the things that we need to talk about when we talk about jury selection is who can be a juror. So again, use the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. So who can be a juror, who can't be a juror? What do you guys know about this? Who can be a juror? I love that, a juror. There we go. I can enunciate and it understands me. You do have to be over 18. Yes, very good. And maybe it would help more to think about where do they get the pool from? Who do they pull from? Yeah, previously convicted felons lose a lot of their rights, including the right to serve on juries. And in some cases, the right to vote, although states are starting to take that back. I believe Virginia actually just restored voting rights to several tens of thousands of felons. Yeah, registered voters in some jurisdictions. So it's really interesting where they pull it from. So the standard pool is, in fact, as Annika just said, the registered voters. But in some cases, they might also pull from like driver's licenses logs. But typically, they're going to pull from registered voters. Which is really interesting because a lot of states want to do what, say, Washington State does, which is you're just automatically registered to vote. In which case, it would really expand actually the pool of jurors that you can pull from, which is kind of cool. And it's a random selection from that list. That's where you get the jury pool. And then the jury is established from there through all the procedures we're going to talk about today. There are some people who can be excluded. Yeah, exactly what Greta just said. Are there people excused for medical reasons after the age of 70? Yes. There's also, for example, like they might not be automatically excluded, but often law enforcement officials or spouses of law enforcement officials will be removed pretty early in the jury selection process simply because of the potential for bias. I have heard other people who have PhDs in clinical psych, especially who have specialties in psych and the law, talk about being excluded because they essentially know too much. Yeah, Hayden, exactly. Attorneys are excluded. Judges would probably be excluded as well. And on your assignment for today, actually, you're going to talk about, who should be excluded and who shouldn't. So I'm going to go ahead and get the link for y'all for our assignment. You know what? I'm going to have to exit this. All right. So this should be set up so everyone can edit it. And then I'm going to stop sharing screen while I figure out breakout rooms. All right, if I do 5, there's 3 to 4 people per room. So let's do that because then there's one group per question. So you're going to just be looking at some of the information about juries in general. There is one question that refers to a couple boxes in your book. So hopefully at least one person in your group has their book nearby they can refer to. But if not, it's the Casey Anthony trial and the Jerry Sandusky trial. So they're pretty well known, so you can probably just Google them. So, all right, I'm going to create the groups. I'm going to give you 20 minutes to work through the questions, and then we'll bring you all back.